Hi everyone, today I'm going to use a fabulous new stamp set from the July-August catalogue. I'm going to use the Jawsome birthday stamp plus thin cuts. Just this stamp set here. Love these little shark critters, and I'm going to make 4 different cards. All of them are going to use some blending with Distress Oxide inks. All of them are just going to use the images and the sentiments from this stamp set, but they have 4 different looks. And I'm also going to bring in the fancy border thin cuts, and I wanted to point these out because sometimes you miss things from the core catalogue, and it retires at the end of August 2021. And they're sort of tucked away here. There's not a huge image of them, but they're one of my most used thin cuts when it comes to card making, and also making borders, or you can match them all up to make long strips on a scrapbooking layout. So I didn't want to miss that. And then in card 4, I'm going to make a shaker card with a little bit of a twist using the Circle Shaker window set. So let's get started. I have a bit to show you, but I've sped most of it up so that it will be a lot quicker. A lot of the prep is already done. So the first card I'm going to do today is involving, and I've just used this when we look at it, cloud thin cut. So that's clouds if you look at it from going this way, but if you look at it from this edge, it also looks like waves. So what I've done for the first card is cut about 6 of each, and I've just lined them up, cut 2 at a time, lined it back up, and I've got 6 separate pieces to stack together because I want to do something in between each of these. So once I've got all my 6 pieces, basically all I need to do is glue them together. And then I would keep going. I'm making a few more of these to get the end result, but I'll show you quickly what I'm doing with the blending. So I'm starting with my darkest Distress Oxide, which is Chip Sapphire, and that's the bottom layer, and I'm just coming in off the end. I'm going to get my post-it note to stop my hands and my fingers from getting too messy because I don't want to spread the ink onto other sections. And it's a little bit fussy, but the reason why I'm doing this on the sections is because I want to control where the colours are. And then I'm coming in with Peacock Feathers. Now you could do this on a card panel and basically do all the ink blending so you've got a bigger piece to work with, but as I said, I want this to have more control of where the colour is coming in. And it doesn't matter if the colour doesn't come in totally perfect, because what we're in the blending, because we're just creating layers of blue for an ocean scene, and I'm going to treat it with some water so we get some splotches as well. And then I'm going to keep going up. Now I've got some other Distress Oxide inks that I love to use, so I'm going to bring in Broken China for the next layer on top of Peacock Feathers. This one is very, very juicy. Usually I tap it off a bit first, but every now and then I forget. And then on the edges, I've picked them up and I've gone around the sides and the tops and the bottoms of the waves to blend the colour in a little bit more. And then it's just a case of repeating this, but before I do that, I'm going to show you how I do my ink splatters. I just get my water brush, squeeze a little drop of water on there, and then add as much or as little water as I want. The closer you get sometimes, the better control you have of where the droplets are going to go. And then once I'm finished doing that, I just bring in my paper towel and dab that off. And that reacts with the Distress Oxide inks beautifully, and you get some nice speckling that mimics water. So let's bring in the card that I'm doing, that I have prepped. And you can see here I've got the layers of colour. So this has got chipped sapphire, peacock feathers, and then salty ocean. And then the top part I've just left white. And then I've brought in the bitty beads to put in amongst there to give a little bit of an extra effect. So to do that, I just use liquid glass. This bottle's getting a little bit empty. Run the liquid glass all through this gap. So I've laid them all out, and this is why I've got 6 layers. So I've worked out that with the bitty beads, having something about 6 layers high gives a nice solid edge to trap in those bitty beads, and also with the liquid glass. And I've used the white ones and the bright blue ones, and for this middle section I'm using these greeny coloured ones, and I'm just going to sprinkle these. If you've got a little tray like this, it comes in handy to trap them all, because they do go everywhere and they're easy then to pour back into the container. And these are just cheap little dollar store type containers that I've found that are the perfect size to hold the bitty beads that we stock. See if I've got any holes that I want to add some more in, and I'm quite happy with how that looks. And this is where this tray comes in handy, but they do tend to jump about. So now all I need to do is attach my shark. I'm going to line him up so his little hat sort of goes in between the birthday and the is. And it brings in these 2 sentiment pieces and makes it all a cohesive look, and it looks like he's jumping up out of the waves to say happy birthday. And on the inside, I've got some leftover pieces here that I had done and practiced with, so I thought I may as well do a little panel to put on the inside of the card and decorate that with a coloured in little shark from the same set. This is card 2 that I've done. It is the same sort of concept as the first one, but instead of separating the layers from this border die, I have stacked them so that they're on top of each other. And what I've done with them, instead of laying them all directly above each other, I've moved them. So I've actually cut the piece of white cardstock a little bit larger so that I've got more wiggle room when I cut the fancy border, because this fancy border is 6 inches long, but the card panel itself is only 4 inches wide. So if I cut longer strips and then do the blending, I can then trim it down. So I've cut a white piece here that is 5 1/4 high by 4 inches wide, and then I've just stacked these up. And the blending with this one is just all one colour. I haven't graduated it like I've done with this one here. So this is chipped sapphire, and then there's broken china, peacock feathers, and then salty ocean. And then on the card panel itself, I've brought in tumbled glass, and I've just gone up and blended it very gently so that it then disappears into the white. And that is the only piece that's popped up on foam tape, so that I can tuck this little shark behind it, and I've popped him up on foam tape as well. And you can see here I've added another little one of these borders and put a shark on the inside to finish off the inside of the card. Card number 3 started off as one panel that I was going to blend all the way up, but then I decided to trim it out so that I could pop the little shark in. And I can show you how I did this blending. Instead of cutting all of these as individual pieces to stack up, I've used the cut as a stencil. So I'll just move this aside. This card panel is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I quite like having the white crisp edge around here, and it just brings it in a little bit more than the other 2 cards. Now I have 2 pieces here that I have cut from white cardstock, quite large, so they're larger than the 3 1/4 by 5 inch panel, so that I can move them up and down to get the layers here. The trick with this is to go in with a fairly light hand. So these are the waves coming up from the bottom of the ocean, and I'm going to go in first with chipped sapphire. So I've got a piece here just to tap off once I've inked up, because it's easier to go in lighter and then add more than it is to go in too heavy. And I do want to get the shadows and the different texture of what would be an ocean, then going straight in with blending and going hard like that with it. So there's my first part of the ocean, and then I'm going to move this so that the waves aren't all lining up perfectly, and without re-inking I'm going to go in again. And I'm just concentrating more towards the edge of where this stencil part is. And if I think something has blended in just a little bit too much, I can go back in and add a little bit more depth to that section to try and break up that blending a little bit. So see how that's made that stand out just a little bit more. You can see that it's quite textured, it's not all smooth, and that's the look that I'm going for. And then I'm going to come in with Peacock Feathers, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, and I'm going to tap off so I don't have too much ink, and I'm going to go in on the side, and I just keep repeating this process all the way up the card panel. So I'll fast forward this so that you can watch it on a little bit more of a speed than sitting there and watching me do the whole thing. So there's my ocean all done and ready for some splatters. Now if I think these areas here just need a little bit more colour, I can just go back in with the edge of my blending tool and fill that in just a little bit. Because I do want to keep these caps of the water distinctive from the next layer up. I'm just going to get my scissors And like I've done here, I've trimmed out this top one. Now this one I haven't done quite as high, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just whatever turns out. And that would be the layer that goes on here. So I'm going to treat that with some water splatters. So now I've got this layer that is going to sit on top. I've got a card panel here that is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And from this section here, I'm going to bring in some lighter Distress Oxide ink, some Tumbled glass, to do like a sky that comes up. So I'm just going to roughly trace where this is so I know where to blend from. No one's going to see that pencil mark. And I'm coming in with an extremely light hand to get this done. So lots of tapping off, starting below that pencil line and blending it up. And effectively the colour then disappears into the white. So you can see how that gives that nice soft edge. So I can assemble this with some foam tape or with some fun foam and pop that up, slip my little shark in underneath and add the sentiment, and the card is done. So for card 4, I'm going to make a shaker card, but with a little bit of a difference. What I've done is cut a panel at 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And then I've traced with my pencil the circle of where that is, and then I've come in with 3 of my Distress Oxide inks. So Chipped Sapphire, Salty Ocean, and then Tumbled Glass. And I've just gone over an area where I know the circle is that's going to be behind the shaker element. So I have that ready to go, but what I've also done is I've run some embossing powder through a laminating sheet. So you can get your laminating sheet, and this technique has been done many, many times, and it was a big hit a few years ago, but I thought it would be fun to bring back in for this card because I quite like how that looks a little bit frothy and a bit like the water is moving. So all you need to do for this is get a laminating pouch. I've just got some A5 ones. So you just need to open that up, grab some embossing powder between your thumb and your forefinger, and just sprinkle it very lightly. I'm hoping you can see what I'm doing on the camera. If you put too much in, you get a bit of a blob. So you can see I'm hardly using any at all. So now my laminating machine has warmed up. All I have to do is feed this through. And what it will do is melt the powder. So you can see here, I hardly used any embossing powder at all. And it's given me a nice little sprinkle section here. Here's a bit lined, but what I would do is cut this section out to use on my card. If you put too much embossing powder in, you will end up with more blobs of it. So if you want more of a snow flurry type look, you can put more in. It's a bit of an experiment, but for this purpose, I only want a very light amount. If you're going to do quite a few of these sheets, I would recommend just doing 2 or 3 at the most, depending on your laminator, because it does get very hot because you haven't got any paper in between here. So don't sit there and think you're going to make like 20 of these all in one go. It will start buckling your laminating pouch and making it crinkle. So now it's just a case of adhering everything together, but you'll notice with the acetate sheets there is a film on them, and I've found the easiest way to get that film off is to just get a bit of washi tape and pull that off. Before, if you don't pull that off, it's a little bit milky behind there, so it's always best to remove it. So I'm going to adhere this with some liquid glass. I want to put a block on that for it to set. Oh, I don't have any blocks out. I'll just put some ink pads on that to make it set. And I'm going to use liquid glass just around the edges of this as well to adhere to the card base. And I'll just make sure I've got that in the right position. Need to come down just a little bit. Using liquid glue is really good for this because you've got time to adjust everything. And any glue that's left over at the top there is going to be hidden. So that's just about right there. Then what I can do is, I've already used the little squares and the pieces that were inside of this frame part. I'm just going to take this off, and I like to leave them on this shape here so that it is easy to align this up and I don't warp that trying to peel it off and then adhere it. And when I hold things in my hand, I just find that things line up just that little bit easier. I've used our silver foil metallic paper. This piece is going to go directly on top, just with regular glue. That's the white and green Tombow glue. And then this is going to go over here, but before I do that, I'll peel this back area off. So this is all nice and sticky, and because this is foam, it's going to trap the beads inside of here. So I'll just make sure that that is all nicely pushed down. I'm going to sprinkle, I think, just a few of these little green ones. I don't want too many beads in there because I want my blending and the melted embossing powder on that laminate sheet to show through, and just a few of these bright blue ones as well. So that's just enough beads to shake around. I actually don't mind when a few of them get trapped up against the sticky part of that foam circle. And then I just need to attach my little shark, and I'm going to use some foam tape for that. So I need some on this section of his tail, smaller piece, and around the outside of his body. And then I'm just going to use liquid glass on the rest of this part here to make him stick. But first, before I put the liquid glass on, I'm just going to peel this little bit off. And then all I need to do now is put the sentiment on. I love how interactive these shaker cards are, and just by putting a few of the bitty beads in rather than piling too many in there, the embossing powder treatment to the laminating pouch shows through, and so does the blending as well, and it gives a lot of shakeability. I love this one with the bitty beads in between the ocean sections, and then this one here with the shark poking his nose out above the waves. And this one just with all blending, no layers of paper required apart from cutting the top part here and doing another blended background. and then this fabulous shaker card, keeping them all fairly simple, fairly clean, and using the Distress Oxides to pack a bit of a punch with the cards. I'll put some still shots up at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.